thank you everyone for joining today. Thank you for Kim for having me as well. So today I'll be talking about a kind of mixture of things. Some things that have kind of happened during my life. Be speaking about kind of puberty and autism, coping with the teenage years, and also how kind of lockdown has affected us, and the autism community as well. So yeah, I'll be probably speaking about a mixture of things, to be honest, all the way from school, all the way to employment, and yeah, just kind of my journey, I think, with autism and all the other stuff. So, just a bit of an introduction about me. So I've got autism, got OCD, got ADHD, and got epilepsy. The doctor seems to love me. I think he just likes to give me conditions, really, and just goes with it. But yeah, I mean, I think growing up, there was always, I couldn't speak till I was 6. So my mum always knew, there was something that was stopping my kind of development and the ability to speak. And I think that always kind of worried her. But at the same time, I could do things, that just neurotypical, people could do, and my dad first realised, for instance, why can't he speak, but he can remember, his way around a map on a video game, and it was just all of these things that kind of thought, okay, what's kind of happening, and there's something there that we need to make sure, so we can support him in a way that he needs, all the way to, when I was growing up in shops, I'd often have a meltdown in shops. I think in that time they were probably known as tantrums or the kid throwing a fit, and really in reality we can look back at that now and go, actually, that's just me having a meltdown, not being able to speak, not being able to say to mum or dad, can I come out of this shop because it's too much for me to cope with. And actually the only way I could communicate was through, screaming and shouting, and crying, because it was too much for me. So over the years, the understanding, even for, my family has massively grown, because I always say the person that's going to understand the autism just as much as somebody with it is the parents, because they kind of live through it with you. And my mum's always said, with my brother, who's neurotypical, hasn't got any conditions, it's often your kids growing up with you. But my mum's always said about me that my mum had to grow up with me. So it's always a unique perspective, I think, on that. So I work full time in IT. So I started working at 16, I think it was. Went to college and then started work. So I've been in IT now for 7 years. I've been in IT now. Still don't know everything. Still learning. But I mean, I never thought it would be a job that I'd be in. I remember at school being good at IT and my mum and dad thinking I was a genius when really all I knew was how to get into control panel and do task manager, and that was like wow to them. That blew them away. But that was it, but I always had a kind of interest, and then it just ended up being a kind of job, when I grew up. With that as well, I'm also an ambassador for the National Autistic Society. So I've been an ambassador for them since 2016. I was involved in one of the big campaigns that they've done, which was Could You Stand the Rejection? Because currently there's only 16% of people in full-time work with autism, and that hasn't changed for 10 years. Obviously, with the global pandemic now happening, it does really worry me and concern that number's not only not going to increase, but possibly decrease. But that's a campaign that I'm massively involved with, and just try really to express any route for autistic people to get into work, you know, whether that's through an apprenticeship or work experience or volunteer work to begin with. Yeah, I'm very keen to explore those avenues and actually reserve those kind of avenues for autistic people, because we already know that employers are very reluctant to hire somebody with autism because they don't know how to support them. I also do acting, so I was sat at home one day and I was watching EastEnders, and don't watch it now, but I was very a keen soap watcher, and over the years, um, you know, there's only so many pubs blowing up that you can take, so I then kind of stopped, but um, I sat at home one day and I just thought how brilliant it must be to tell a story day in, day out, you know, every night on television, and those stories to resonate with people, and what a kind of great art it is. And, you know, I've watched wrestling for years as well, and there's a lot of acting that goes into wrestling. So, you know, I've always admired the art of telling the story and people being able to believe it. So I thought, well, just get off your bum and do it. So now do acting in my spare time, and I'll talk about some of the stuff that I've been involved with and done a bit later in the presentation as well. So I also do YouTube. Been on YouTube for 10 years. Still haven't made it. It's been you know, I'm not like PewDiePie level or Shane Dawson or, you know, these guys that just buy Lamborghinis now and do challenges. But I mean, I've pretty much, I'd say, done everything on YouTube, to the point where I've done bike stunt show, soap opera, done a show called Ugly Watch, where I went up to people with a microphone and asked them about ugly celebrities. Why not? Um, so yeah, I mean, I've pretty much done it all, I think. But now my YouTube videos really align with what I do now, which is more of the ambassador autistic awareness kind of approach, you know, to now, you know, I will make weekly videos or upload the speeches that I do just to raise awareness and give people more understanding and the tools for people to go away with and support and help somebody with autism, you know, so they can, you know, get a job or have the help in the school that they need, and all of it really. My YouTube channel, I will have a link at the end as well, so if you ever want to go on and have a look, please feel free to do so as well. And I'd say about 4 years ago as well, I decided that I wanted to start doing something for charity every year. Now this year has been very hard, obviously due to the pandemic, but I'm looking still to usher something in by the end of the year. But the first year I'd done a skydive for charity. It was for the Make-A-Wish Foundation. I think we raised around, I think it was £700. The second year I'd done an abseil for the National Autistic Society. I think that was around £500. And then I'd done the abseil off the London Olympic red twirly thing that they built. That was fun. All of them I've not really liked, but you know, you kind of do it once you've raised the money. You can't really chicken out. The third year, I'd done a 15K run for pancreatic cancer, and I think we raised around 500 for that. And then the year after, I'd done a zip line in Wales for the Roy Castle Foundation and British Heart Foundation, and that was around £800. And then this year, I'm trying to do it for the NHS and National Autistic Society as well, and that would be doing a 15-mile walk all the way from Virginia Waters to Windsor Castle and back. So and I'm going to live stream it hopefully, and you know, try and make it fun and let people see the amount of pain I'm in. But yeah, if the marathon before is anything to go by, it will be 4 hours, maybe more, to do it all. So so yeah, I'm probably looking at 6 hours. So that's just a bit about me. So I was going to talk about puberty and neurodiversity in, I suppose, my life, and in this kind of core subject as well. I'll probably be covering these subjects. So these are all the kind of things I think that not only affect neurotypical people, but they can have, I think, more significant changes with neurodiverse people. Um, because I think for me anyway, it was more understanding all these things while I was going through it. You know, I think growing up, not being able to speak to the age of 6, and then you get to the point where you think you're understanding, you know, people and the world, and then you go through puberty. um, it's quite difficult. You know, it's quite hard to grasp. And actually, I went through mine quite late. Yeah, I started really going through puberty when I was in year 10, year 11, as most people actually kind of start around 11 years old, which would be, you know, year 7, year 8 kind of time period. Obviously, it was tough because, I mean, you're just about to leave school. You've got all this stuff going on, and then your body's changing, and your thought process is changing, and you're seeing physical changes as well, and it all can be very kind of stressful. And at the same time, we know that, for instance, the development for for me, you know, I mean, not for everybody, but it's quite common for people with, you know, autism, you know, conditions to develop a bit later. And that could be in regards to speech, it could be in regards to reading age, that could be in regards to behaviour, that could be in regards of puberty. And I think mine was the latter. You know, I didn't have a good reading age when I was in year 11. You know, I hit puberty really late when I was, you know, when I was at school. Um, but the thing that kind of helped me was I was very on point, I think, with my emotional side. You know, so through years of not really understanding what people felt or thought, my mum was very supportive and very um, informative, and gave me the education actually of how people feel, to the point now where I think I've probably got too much empathy for people. Um, but that's because I've had to learn it, and a lot of people just develop that emotion, you know, after being told once or twice. As I've constantly had to have the sit down with my mum when I've done something wrong and gone, "How do you think they felt? You know, how would you feel if you were put in that situation?" You know, I always remember a story where I nicked a bike, running out of the school gates, and managed to lock all the teachers out of the school. Um, but I, I remember grabbing a bike and just riding off with it. And in my head, didn't care about who the bike belonged to. My main objective at the time was just to get away from the teachers, lock them out of the school, and basically just have the school hostage, really, with the keys. Um, but after that, my mum said, "You know, how do you think that made him feel?" And I went, "Well, I don't really care about you know, how he feels." And she was like, "Okay, well, how would you feel if someone done that to your bike? How would you have felt?" And you kind of backtrack and kind of go, "Well, you know, wouldn't bother me." And then my mum was like, "No, no, come on, I think it would." And then you have those conversations, and over the years, you know, I really learnt that. I really picked up on how people felt. So from an emotional aspect through puberty, I wasn't one of these people that necessarily wanted to hurt anybody or say horrible things, because I was very aware actually at that point of yeah, how people felt and how people may perceive things. The issues I had was the following, which was, you know, the development. You know, I always felt I wasn't where I needed to be educationally. I would often speak to friends, and they were learning about X, Y, and Z subjects, which I wasn't aware of. You know, and it made me feel a bit not intelligent and not clever, and you know, that can be really difficult, especially a bit about my background was I went to a primary school, was diagnosed with all those conditions while I was at primary school. Um, had kind of really bad OCD. That was kind of the worst thing at school. So what I'd do is I'd just speak about some of the stuff, because I think my journey will probably cover all of this anyway. So I remember at primary school, not being able to speak, and then four, year 3, I started being able to speak a bit better. The teachers had to do things like toe by toe to make my reading, make my pronunciation better, um, and get my reading better. Um, at this time as well, it was quite difficult because teachers didn't really have a good understanding of autism, to the point where a teacher turned around to my mum and said he's not autistic, he's just naughty. Um, and that was that. She's now a head teacher, which is scary, and you hope that they learn from those lessons. But it is very scary to think that. I had a really supportive TA, and it's very difficult, I think, when that age, because when the TA leaves, it's very hard for you to accept the new TA because they're not, the former person. And they're going to have new ways of teaching you and new ways of learning. But what this TA did for me was she knew I was behind on my reading, so she used to take me out of the classroom because she used to know that I would be embarrassed about reading sentences. A lot of people in classrooms would go, right, you do a sentence, you do a sentence, you do a sentence. And when it came to me, I had a book that I didn't really know how to read, and that was quite difficult for me to face that. So her approach was, take me out of the lesson, read a book that I was going to be interested in, because there's no point reading me like The Highwayman or anything like that. The book she got me was Fairy Tales with a Twist. So it's things like Cinder Boy and how he wanted to go to the football game, and the three bad pigs and the little wolf, in his house. So it was always roles reversed, and it just really helped me because it was a book I wanted to read. Around this time, this is where my OCD kicked in. My OCD was quite bad. I was obsessed with the fact that someone was trying to poison me, could be anyone, to the point where my mum or someone around me would have to take a bite out of my food, because I was just really scared of that. That all started because there was a tree outside the school. It had like a mushroom on it, and I accidentally touched it, and my brother turned around and said it could be poisonous. So from that's where that continued. Then I had an obsession with germs. I was scared of getting anything, getting ill. So I'd wash my hands constantly to the point where they were really kind of red and really dry. Then it was my weight. So I then had a 3-year weight obsession. Really scared of putting on weight, and really worried about what I looked like. Then it went into bad luck, and that was around when I was at college during puberty. That's where the OCD was probably the hardest, because it got really bad around that point, to the point where anything I touched outside, I would have to bring home, things like sticks and stones, or I was worried about dropping stuff, so I'd have to go around the whole football pitch that I just played on, checking that I hadn't dropped stuff. I would be up at 12 o'clock at night, doing dishwashers, because I was scared basically if I didn't do it, something bad was going to happen, like my mum dying or my dad dying. So it was very, very hard, around that time. And that was all round kind of puberty, and that's when it hit me most. So yeah, I left primary school and then went to a secondary school, a mainstream secondary school, and that was tough. It had an ASD unit there, but they wasn't very supportive. They just wasn't, I think, right with their approach and how they approached things, really. To the point where I asked if I couldn't have a TA sat next to me just because I didn't want people to know I had a condition, and I just knew that by having a TA sat right next to me, it would kind of put a kind of bullseye on my back, really, to say this person's got conditions, and I didn't want to get bullied or ridiculed for it. So it was kind of difficult. And I slowly saw while I was at this school that a lot of kids that had conditions would slowly be kicked out. But the kids that had conditions but was doing well, and progressing, they would keep at the school. So I don't know if they've done that for, statistics. I don't know if they wanted to say, 100% of our people in the ASD unit went on to, get GCSEs and everything. I don't know. But I just saw a lot of autistic people that needed help that was kicked out and just wasn't given it. The same thing with the school as well, as they had an LSD unit and they had an ASD unit, which I always think complicated things, because it's almost allowing people to know this person's got autism, but the people in the LSD unit, they could have anything. They could have dyslexia, they could have dyspraxia, they could have OCD, they could have ADHD. So I always thought it was a little bit silly for the school to kind of say, this is the ASD unit, this is where all the autistic people go, because that can put a bullseye on people, that can put a kind of target on people, and I always wanted people to get to know me first before they judge me for the condition that I've got, because I mean, it's a part of me, but it doesn't make me who I am, and I always wanted people to see that side of me first. So the reason I kind of tell you all that is because it was more about the development. The development was hard for me at school, with people, with education, and then later on in the years, it was more with myself. I always found it hard to come to terms with my own development. Educationally, I always felt I was behind. I thought my people skills were great, because I had to kind of, over the years, learn and really study that. But where my developments, I think, suffered through puberty and neurodiversity was just the development educationally wise. And I don't know if that's maybe the schools I went to, or if that was just the condition. I think to begin with it might have been because obviously I couldn't speak till I was 6. But after that secondary school, I then went to a autistic school, where it had people not only with autism, but it had people with a complex, load of needs. You had people there that would be aggressive, all the way to ODD, all the way to PDA, all the way to ADHD, and people there that just went through traumatic experiences in their life. And that, I think, was fundamentally part of my development, because it actually taught me what other people go through, what other people have, what other people are coping with on a day-to-day basis. And it wasn't easy at the school. Sometimes I'd see there must be about 10 fights a day at this school. The teachers were allowed to positively handle. It sometimes was a bit like being in prison, but being innocent. But even though the education I didn't learn a lot from, not because the school was anywhere near as like they didn't have it, because they did. It was just more the environment that we were in. The school offered so much support that it just outweighed the education side. And there were some situations where, the ability to learn wasn't there. When you've got a classroom of 6 people and, they want to do this or they want to do that, or they want to walk out the classroom, or they're swearing at each other or bullying each other, and it creates a kind of hostile environment. It can be hard to learn in that kind of, in that environment. And again, it's no fault of the teachers. It was just the environment that we were in, which made it difficult, which ultimately meant that the school didn't do GCSEs either. They just done qualifications like functional skills, OCRs, and things like that. So even when I was leaving school, I thought, my God, I'm going to leave a school with no GCSEs. What does this mean? So development-wise, I think where I struggled with development was education, but also myself. Understanding what I was going through, and um, not so much what other people were, because I think I always had that knowledge and always was learning that anyway. But learning more about myself is where I struggled with. The physical changes were always difficult. I think around this time, it's where you start having more thoughts about certain things, and you feel, especially with OCD, you can sometimes obsess about that, or you can worry about that more than what you potentially should do, because you don't realise it's a normal thing that people go through. So you almost can feel bad for thinking some of the stuff that you do, but it's actually quite common. And I would say with anyone with OCD or autism, it's not abnormal to think what you're thinking through these times. It is a big part of growing up, and I think that's kind of what I again, development wise, which I lacked in, was I didn't understand puberty enough. And I think it's something that should be taught more in schools. We're taught a lot about sex education, but we're not actually told about how we're going to feel, or what we're going to see, or what is going to change necessarily about when we go through puberty. I mean, my understanding really of puberty was, I'm probably, going to get hairier. In a sense, that's it. I'm going to grow a beard. Um, you know, but that was it for me. I didn't know what was coming. To the mood swings, to the anxiety, to the shift of what I'd actually be worried about. To the point where I'd be worried about a game, to now I'm worried about adult things, and more stressful things, and those things that I'm used to worrying about are no longer a concern. And why is that? And God, it's a tough time. Um, what I also learned through that period as well is the potential for seizures can increase during puberty, especially with autistic people. So I was never diagnosed with epilepsy at a young age. I actually had my first epileptic fit while I was at college. So I was playing on my game one night, just as normal as I normally would be doing. And I used to, again, going through puberty and typical teenage years, I used to get frustrated at my game quite a lot, to the point where I used to bang my controller, or get annoyed at the game and think it's rigged, a bit like Donald Trump's doing now, basically. And I used to think, why, this is rigged. This set up against me, and I used to get frustrated. So I used to bang a little bit. But one night I carried on banging, and my mum and dad shouted upstairs, Max, cut that banging out. And I carried on banging. So my dad said, I mean it, you carry on banging, I'm going to shut the door. Carried on banging. My dad shut the door, and then my mum turned around and went, mother's intuition, I think, something isn't right here. She went to the bottom of the stairs and said, Max, answer me. If you're mucking about, I'm not going to be very happy. She came up the stairs, and I was having a fit. And she needed to call an ambulance. And at first they thought I was having a stroke, because there was kind of no kind of symptoms of an epileptic fit at the time, especially things like I was feeling very sick. We found out later that's because my dad gave me water, which is you'd think that's a sensible thing to do once somebody's had a fit, but actually it's not a great thing to do, because their body's not actually working correctly, to digest it. So you just want to throw it up. Again, I hadn't urinated either, which that can happen or can't when you have a fit. And some people are awake while they have theirs. I wasn't. So, I mean, I woke up, I didn't know who my mum and dad was. I didn't know who I was. I didn't know where I was. That was quite difficult. I actually realised who my mum and dad was before I remembered who I was, which I don't know how that works. But that's what happened. And yeah, you know, that was the first fit I had. And I went to the doctors and they said, well, anyone can have one. So we can't really diagnose you with epilepsy, but anyone could have one fit and that could be it. My mum cleverly said to me that I couldn't drive for 2 years, when actually it was 6 months. But my mum wanted to be sure. And luckily she did, because around the 2-year mark, I was thinking about starting to drive and do my lessons. Again, my mum just said, well, let it go past 2 years and you know. And anyway, I got up at work one day and I remember I changed my desk that day, which again, for me, I mean, changing a desk isn't a big deal to some people, but it can affect people with autism, you know, autistic people, because it's a big change for them. Even though to you it seems small, a desk change can actually really change the environment and their kind of their their calmness of a situation. You know, it's changing, it's kind of flipping their world upside down, and they've got to kind of get used to the idea of this change. You know, when you change desks as well, you might be sat with people that are a calming influence who you do get on with, and when that's changed, it can be quite difficult. But I mean, I remember that day I was working on someone's machine. I remember something went wrong with it, and I was panicking because I felt that I had done that. I managed to fix it, and I came back to my desk, which had changed, and I went up and I got some water, which is something I rarely do because I don't drink a lot in the day. So I went up, I got some water, and apparently I just passed out, hit my head on the desk, and I was having a fit. Um, you know, they called an ambulance, and I remember waking up, and apparently what I kept saying to people was, I haven't had a fit. I haven't had a fit. I just fell out of my chair, and it was because I must have knew subconsciously that I had a fit, and I remembered that feeling. Um, Again, I thought, well, maybe it's just a one-off, and then I had another one the next week where I started seeing black dots, and then I had a fit. And then the third one was when I was in the shower, and I managed to get up from my shower, which is downstairs, get all the way upstairs, and I woke up in my bed, and I had no idea how I got there. And that's kind of when it scared me, and I rang my dad and I said, I think I've had a fit. And he came home and the shower was still on, and everything else. So yeah, and that's when I had to go on medication for it, because it was obviously going to impact my day-to-day life. So that was another thing that kind of hit me through puberty, that I wasn't expecting. But I think that can be brought on by, it's really important that we lower the stress, I think, through puberty, that we lower the anxiety, we come up with coping strategies, which could be things like keeping a log, could be things like keeping a video journal, could be things like they done at me for primary school, where they built me a green box and they said, any worry that you get, we want you to put in the box. And then once you put it in the box, it's away, you know, it's gone in your head. And then we review it at the end of the day and we see if it's still an issue or not. And that really taught me to prioritize my thoughts and my process in that. You know, it taught me actually how many silly things I was worrying about. And by the end of the day, I'd realize, oh, well, that's no longer an issue. That's no longer an issue. Why was I worried about that? Really taught me to prioritize those thoughts in a way that I needed to. So, and I think things like that can even help, especially going through puberty and all of that. You know, it's, you've got a kind of enough to worry about, let alone the added stuff. So Yeah, I think any decrease of obviously anxiety and stress, which I've labelled there because unfortunately it does go up and it goes up in different ways. You know, I remember going through puberty and you know, the anxiety and stress was worse. I was worried about what people thought about me. I was worried about what I looked like. I was worried about um, nearly anything. You know, things that hadn't even happened yet, and they're still there now. You know, because I grew up, but necessarily not tackled those issues while I needed to. And it's something that I tackle now, you know, to the point where I get headaches, you know, where I stress too much sometimes. So just about working on that. And the last one really through puberty is feelings and behaviour. So luckily, I feel I was okay through that. I mean, again, I went through puberty quite late, but a quite common trend is, you know, your feelings will change towards people, whether that's emotionally or in different ways as well, and behaviour will. You know, some people can. Um, they can start hanging out with the wrong people. They can start doing more things that necessarily they wouldn't do. Um, so it's very difficult, I think, as a parent, especially for my mum, you know, to kind of manage those things. My mum was always the approach. She isn't going to, unless I'm doing something wrong, she isn't going to tell me, you know, my mum never told me who not to hang out with. And I think that's key because I think when you tell someone you can't do something, they want to do it more. My mum was very uh, let him make his own mistakes and he'll learn from them. But at the same time, you know, if I would have went up to my mum and said, "Oh, I'm planning to wreck someone's car," you know, she would, of course, put her foot down and say, "No, you ain't doing that." Um, but I think my mum built the relationship with me, which was when I say no, it's going to be a really important moment. You know, it's going to be a really important no. So when my mum did say no, it wasn't like, oh, you know, mum's going off on one again. It was like, oh, no, she's serious. You know, like my mum had a kind of good line with me, which was, you know, you can shout, you can scream, you know, whatever. I mean, these were never said, of course, but these were the things that I think my mum let myself and my brother get away with. So things like shouting, answering back, she used to get angry with, but there was one line she would never let us cross, and that was swearing. That was a no-no. That was like that was the equivalent of you know, not bowing to the Queen. That was like you're not going to do that. And that was, and we never did. You know, we never did. We understood that boundary that you can tell me how you're feeling. You can shout and you can scream. And when I say enough's enough, you know, then you know that it's enough. But if you swear, that is it. You know, that's not even going to happen. And it didn't. You know, and I think it's really important, you know, to have that, obviously, that relationship with your mum, that you can go to her and speak to her about anything, and they're not going to judge you, and they're not going to tell you off. You know, they're going to understand. If it's something that's big, expect, you know, I suppose some form of telling off. But 9 times out of 10, I think my mum always wanted me to be able to go to her and talk to her about anything, even if it was bad. um, and that was the kind of relationship I think she always wanted from us. You know, she always said to us growing up, "You can come to me about anything." Um, she always said, "I'm not going to promise I won't get mad, but I'm not going to judge you, and I'm going to help you as best as I can." You know, and I think it's really important for that, and that can really help with anxiety and the behaviour, because sometimes when you respect your parents as well, you think, oh, you know, what would mum do, or what would they do, you know, and if you've got that good relationship, it can really key. And I'm not saying that people can't get swayed off by bad influences, but my mum was very the person to say, if you know, I'm not going to stop him from seeing X, Y, and Z, because it's going to want him to see them more, and it's going to encourage that behaviour. And actually, I just need to stand back, and he knows what's right and he knows what's wrong, you know, through educating him through the years. You know, I've never smoked, for an instance. Now it's quite odd because my mum and dad smoked and my brother smokes, but I never did, because I was always taught by them, it's wrong, we're stupid, don't do as what we've done. You know, learn from our mistake, which I'm a firm believer in, that you can learn from people's mistakes. And they just said, don't do it. Now they don't smoke. They've given up smoking. And there was probably a lot of kind of leeway for me to say, well, you two smoke, so why can't I? But they always taught me, no, learn from us. It's not a good thing. We were silly to do it, and we don't want you doing it. And you know, it was a good message by them. So I think at, again, puberty, you can lose sight of your feelings and behaviour. But I think if you've got a supportive network behind you, like your parents, like your brother, you can really kind of keep on track of what's important. Especially through secondary school, I started hanging around with people because I wanted to be liked. And when I was at my secondary school, unfortunately, the people that you hung around with were people that they showed naughty behaviour, you know, because that was the cool kind of thing to do, which put me in an environment where I wasn't comfortable with. You know, I was trying to act like this person that I wasn't. And even though I used to get told off from my mum would never stop me from seeing that person or anything of that, because she knew that that would encourage me more to behave and go and see that person. She just used to say, do you think what you're doing is right? And I used to go, no, that's the only way that people will like me. And my mum would go, well, we need to find a way that that will change. And before long, when I got kicked out of that secondary school, you know, I started to, that's when I started to actually think, I'm not going to care what people think, you know, and I'm just going to care about, you know, how I'm doing educationally. And at that time, it was a little bit too late, because obviously I went to the school where the educational side was hard, but I really got the support that I needed there, and it made me learn more about other people. So again, coping with the teenage years, so moods, mental health, aggression, anxiety, internet and social media. So, I mean, all these I went through, especially through my teenage years, more than, you know, because obviously I went through puberty quite late. So my teenage years, I exhibited more of this. So I always remember when I was in year 7, I was very, I would say I wasn't very nice to people. I mean, I wasn't horrible, but I used to just get so frustrated so quickly, and so angry and so moody and so um, and again, it's frustrating because you don't know why. But it's a lot of change, you know, through the teenage years. You're changing from primary school to a secondary school. It's took you 6 years to learn, you know, how to kind of socialize with people, and how to learn from people, and get used to the environment that you're in. And then you're kind of like, okay, all your friends are going up this school up the road, you're going to a kind of school with an ASD unit in, and you kind of got to make all friends again. You've got to, you know, do all those things, and it can be quite difficult. You know, it can be quite, oh God, um, you know, and that puts you in moods, and then you end up hating, you know, potential family members, because you don't understand why they've sent you to this school versus why they've not sent you to the school with your friends. So, you know, there was a lot of kind of mood, and a lot of, I suppose, it showed a lot of hatred towards people. But I think I was just frustrated young teenager, you know, that took years to communicate, finally made friends, and then they were all kind of ripped apart, you know, and I think that was tough. So that then does have an impact on your mental health. So I think through the years I have had my ups and downs. There's been times where I've been really sad. There's been times where It's been hard, especially moving school to school, and then you then um, go into the big wide world, which is very difficult. So you know, it's very hard to explain mental health as well. In different forms. Some people who are depressed will show it. Some people won't. Some people will hide it. For an autistic person as well, I was good at masking anyway. So when it comes to things like depression, it was easy for me to mask because I'd been masking my whole life. So when you're exhibiting those behaviours, parents, teachers might not see it, but it's always good to form that relationship with that student or your child to say, if you do feel like this, you can come to me and it's okay. We know that aggression is more common when we're going through the teenage years, especially with autistic people. I would always say to teachers and parents, when they're exhibiting that behaviour, it's not them. It's the behaviour's bad and the behaviour's aggressive, but it's not them. It's not them as a person. They're just at that time, just like a meltdown. They've kind of lost control of how to behave, how to navigate, and it's never that person when they're showing that aggression. It's always important to make us aware that behaviour isn't acceptable. But I always say there's no such thing as someone that's naughty, someone that's just naturally aggressive. I always believe the behaviour is naughty. The behaviour can be aggressive, but the person isn't. There's always reasons behind that behaviour, and once you tackle them, you can actually get down to the nitty gritty of it. I mean, I remember being at school. I mean, the teachers used to get punched, spat at, you name it, and they always came in the next day with a smile on their face, and they would interact with that student like nothing had happened, because they realised that there were things going on at home. There were things going on, in their personal life. They were going through things like puberty, and things were changing in their lives that they were scared about. That they didn't know what was going to go on when they left school. So, of course, that kind of aggression and that frustration with the world is going to come out. Some people show anxiety. That's me, unfortunately. I was more of an anxiety person rather than an aggressor. But that was just my different way of coping with it. But I mean, I used to worry about everything. I still do, sometimes. I still worry about X, Y, and Z. But I would say it's got better as I've got older, but I've worried more about different things as I've got older. As when I was younger, I would worry about, oh, if the Undertaker's going to win at WrestleMania, kind of thing, in wrestling, and now it's more like, oh, okay, yeah, how much holiday have I got, or when am I going to get this done, or when am I going to get that done? So your worries really, really change. But the key thing I would say about with the teenage years now, especially, is the internet and social media. So when I was a kid, I remember being given a phone. I think when I was around year 7, but the phone didn't have access to internet. It didn't have, like your iPhones now. Now there is a danger with that currently, because kids will get picked on if they don't have the latest and greatest thing. But at the same time, you also want to restrict as much as you can the access that your child has to the internet. Things like Snapchat, I really disagree with, because it's fundamentally an app which allows you to take a photo, and then the application deletes the photo that you've sent within 2 seconds. So it really worries me that there are applications out there, because it can present a risk and a tool for people like predators to use. If you allow your kid to have Facebook, which I had around year 7, but I always remember that yeah, my mum was. My mum always said to me, if you get a message and you don't know somebody and you don't know who it is, you tell me. You know, you make sure that you tell me. I'm not going to be angry. I just want to know, because of safety. And my mum really had to explain that to me, because as an autistic person, I was kind of like, well, you know, why is someone going to message me that doesn't know me? And it's about understanding that as well. Um, but nowadays, you know, it's blew up to a scale where, I mean, when I was in 2009, when I started Facebook, I mean, it's changed so much now to, you know, people don't realize when they go on an app, you know, you can give access to your Facebook. You know, what you put on your Facebook, people could see. You know, a lot of people will put their other social media in their about page on Facebook. So what that does is it enables someone that doesn't know you, they could see a link to your Snapchat, they could add you on your Snapchat using a different friend's name or a different alias. They could then add you on Snapchat. That person could be someone that you've never met, and then you're exchanging photos with somebody that you've never met, who you think that you know, that you might not know, and that could be any content. And you know, that's a scary thought for me, because as a parent as well, you can't monitor that, because Snapchat then deletes the photo, um, and any evidence that you've been speaking to somebody. As Facebook, the messages are always there unless they're deleted, but it would it would take both people to delete it. So things like that, I think, are really, really important, to keep a track on our internet and social media use when we're growing up. Because I always speak to people like Vanessa Bob, who runs A Second Voice, and Paul McKenzie, who does a lot of speeches in County Lines. And the bullying has changed, you know, for people with conditions. You know, it went from, oh, look at those shoes that you wear, aren't they bad, to look at the shoes you wear, they're bad, but we've got a way to make you money. And then suddenly, yeah, one of the situations was, you know, an autistic person was had a bag of small amount of cocaine, and he was going to London. I think he was earning like 40 pence an hour, and he was transporting drugs, you know, and he felt that was good, and obviously it isn't. So yeah, you know, these are just the things that I think you need to be careful of, especially in the teenage years, because we're more vulnerable, I think, to you know, believing and following people, you know, in regards to what they're doing, and our perception of things are not not correct, you know, at that time. So those are things that I'm always kind of always careful of, I think, and also always keeping an eye over, with people growing up. So yeah, I mean, those are kind of the tips I would go through with both, though, just to give a bit of thought, because even though I've spoke a lot about kind of my experience and going through it, the tips that I would give for both of these subjects would be, you know, coping with the teenage years. Just make sure that, you know, you've got a supportive teacher, that you can communicate on a day-to-day basis when your child's going through school. Also, make sure that your child can speak to you whenever, whether or not it's going to upset you, or if it's a bad thing, or you know, or if it's, you know, things like aggression or anxiety or the internet. Just make sure that you are going to be there, you know, to speak about it, and they know that, and you're not going to judge them for it. Those would be the key things that I would do. I'd also just do more kind of, it's always important to build relationships with each other. So doing tasks with each other. For instance, my dad, you know, would take me to the cinema every now and again, and that would often get something off my chest, or a car journey. You know, it would often build a foundation for a chat. Sometimes it's very hard for an autistic person to approach that chat. You know, so just by doing something that they're going to enjoy can really bring out that chat. The massive tip I would say about puberty is let them know it's not an embarrassing thing. You know, I think a lot of people generally, aren't embarrassed when they're going through puberty. They don't want to talk about it. And autistic people, will be embarrassed and won't know how to approach that conversation. So, you know, and don't be embarrassed as a parent either, because there might be a time where you go up to them and you go, oh, and then they're like, oh no, that's not happening. But don't be embarrassed about that, because fundamentally there's going to be a day where that does happen. So it's just about, I think, being understanding of that. So yeah, I mean, the tip really for both of these subjects, I would say, is just be there for them. Having that supportive network really helped me throughout the years. And come up with examples where it's happened to you. When you can relate, it can really help you think, okay, it is normal, it is fine. Yeah, there's been so many conversations I have with people with OCD, which they feel bad about the thoughts that they have, and then they hear someone else say it, and they're like, "Oh my god, I have the same thing," and you're kind of already got that communication with them. So it's just really important, I think, to be able to relate, be able to understand, be open to discussion, not judge, be compassionate, educate teachers and other people that need educating, talk about all of these things with your child or with a student, and just educate them, more informative, because the internet, unfortunately, you read stuff on the internet every day, and a lot of it's not true, a lot of it's incorrect. So if you have the discussion, you can make sure that the information that is being given is correct. And again, supportive siblings. So the things that always helped me, and I think the things that we always want to make sure that our child or our brother or our mother is always feeling, is that they feel wanted, they feel cared and loved, they feel valued and needed, they feel hope and achievement, understanding and not judging. And also a really good tip for parents, which I did really want to put, is, tough love isn't bad and can be helpful. A lot of parents will feel bad about potentially making their kid do something that they don't want to do, or telling their child off when they've done something bad. I can honestly say it done me the world of good. I needed to learn those kind of things for me to understand and learn more. To the point where I tell you a story where I got my job at a housing association, and I said to my mum, I said, well, you have to drive me. My mum said, I ain't driving you. You have to get the bus like everyone else. If you want to do these things in life, you're going to have to learn how to do them. Now, bus for, myself and many autistic person can be quite daunting. It can be quite worrying. It can be quite scary. But my mum was, I understand that, and I can understand how you're feeling. But I believe this is something that you are capable of, something that you can achieve, and something that you can do. And I am not going to enable, to drive you every day, because I think that you can do it. And it's just about taking small steps, So for me, I mean, my mum was quite just tough with that and said, you need to get a bus. And I'll tell you how she managed to do it in the end. But just doing small steps, like maybe speaking to the bus driver about, your child, and how he's going to get the bus for the first time, making sure that they're with friends, getting on the bus with them maybe as a test run, just to somewhere can really help. Just getting them used to the environment. I always remember I would have loved, for instance, someone to do a test run with me when I went to college for the first day. Where am I walking to? Where am I getting off? What stop is it called? Because a lot of people with autism work off memory. So if we do it once with somebody, we will remember how to do it. It's just that first time that we would be worried about. But the way that my mum done it was, there was an acting gig that came up here in Lambourne, and the only way to get there was the bus. And I turned around to my mum and said, I've got this acting gig. It's in Lambourne. Will you take me? And my mum went, no, I'm not taking you. You want to get there? Get the bus. And my mum done that because she knew that a job wasn't going to be enough for me to get a bus, but something I really enjoyed and something I was really passionate about. She knew it was going to make me get the bus. It was going to make me do it. So the day came and I was ready to go, and my mum caved in and she went, "I'll take you if you want." And I turned around to my mum and I said, "No, mum, you're right. I need to do this." And I went and I got the bus. Um, and it was because at that time I realised what my mum was saying and I realised what my mum was doing. And it gave me that time to build up and get used to the idea that actually I've got to take this bus. And I built that in my head that I'm going to get the bus, I'm going to do it. So again, that tough love was really good, and it really taught me how to get a bus and do the thing that I needed to do. It's not going to work with everybody, but if you feel that if you feel that your student or your child is going to be capable of doing that, implement small steps, see how it goes. There's never going to be any harm in just seeing how it goes. And also, it's really nice when you have that acknowledgement, I think, from a child or a student to go, actually, no, I thought about it. I'm ready for this now. I realise what you've done, and I'm going to do it. And it gives them a sense of achievement because it made me think, oh my God, if I can do that, I can do anything, it's just a nice thing. So, again, tough love, it might sound horrible, but it isn't always bad. It can be helpful. If you think that your child's done something wrong, or a student, don't be afraid to tell them off. Understand there might be a reason behind what they've done, but it doesn't mean they're exempt from what they've done. They still need to understand, they still need to learn, they still need to know why what they've done is wrong. Otherwise they will just carry on believing what they're doing is fine. And situations for development, like the bus situation, don't be afraid to say, no, I think you can do that, and let's just work towards him doing it, instead of going, no, you can't do that, and he never will be. I had a teacher once that turned around to me when I was at school, and he said, people that say you can do anything in life are liars. And that really kind of disheartened me at that age. I thought, my God, what am I going to do? I want to do this, I want to do that, and this guy's telling me that I can't. So I spent the good majority of my adult life proving him wrong. It fueled me. It made me go, no, I'm gonna make something, and I'm not gonna let people say that you can't do anything just because that's what they believe. So any obstacle I've had, I've tried to overcome it, whether using small steps or just going out there and doing it. But it's really key, obviously, as well, that we have supportive people behind us, and we feel all of those things that are in the presentation, is that, we feel those things while we're doing them. So what happened next for me? So I went through, obviously, the primary school, had really supportive TA, that TA left, then I had a really other supportive TA. Didn't know my number bonds to 10 when I was in year 6. But she created this fun game which enabled me to learn. My reading then got better. Just a bit of a recap here. Then went to the secondary school, which was with the ASD unit. Sadly, got kicked out of that school. The ASD unit wasn't very much help. They didn't really offer me a lot of support, and they did unfortunately keep a lot of autistic people that were doing well, and the people with the autistic people that wasn't doing so well, they would slowly usher out and kick out of the school. And then I went to another school where the education, because of the environment, wasn't as good as hoped, but no fault of the teachers, but the support of that school was second to none. And again, I always praise that school because it changed my life, to the point where when I was doing one of my charity runs, I dedicated it to the head teacher that did die of pancreatic cancer, and that's who I done it for, because he just had such an impact on my life and changed my life, really, and I wouldn't be where I am if it weren't for people like him. So then I left the school. Um, but I'll just tell you a little bit about what happened just before I left. So, first of all, when I was leaving school, I thought about work experience. I thought, my God, what am I going to do when I leave school? And I started working in a cafe. And it was at this point I realised I never want to work in a cafe. I didn't like it. I was not very good. I didn't like texture, for instance, of washing up. It was just very hard for me to take orders. I'm very good with long-term memory, but short-term memory was like if someone says to me, you know, okay, like a telephone number, it's very hard. I would often have to go over it. But if you ask me that number a day later, I probably would be able to tell you it. So it's things like that, and I just wasn't good, and I just realised I don't want to work in a kind of environment like that. Even though the people there were very nice, very supportive, it just wasn't for me. Around this time, I thought, okay, so what else can I do? And luckily, I was able to ring up some companies and ask for work experience. And I was searching for numbers online, and I came across one. He said, "We've never done it before, but let me get back to you and I'll let you know." So I didn't hear for 4 weeks, and I thought, "Oh, that's that." And then he came back to me and he said, "Oh no, okay, let's do it." So I was there for 8 weeks. I walked in, I thought I knew everything about IT. And I remember I got into the car and my mum said, "How did your first day go?" And I turned around and went, "I know nothing about IT." I just learnt so much. And I filled 2 notebooks, I think, in the 8 weeks I was there, of just work. And even on my last day at that work experience, I didn't realise it was my last day. So it was very hard for me to kind of say goodbye and yeah, say goodbye from people really. However, they was going to take me on for an internship, but unfortunately, they moved down to London, so it wasn't really feasible. I then went to college, so it was very like hit and miss. Am I going to get into college? Am I not? Because of my qualifications, and that's where a tutor gave me an unconditional offer, which he basically said, if you get the qualifications that your school offers, um, I would more than happily let you in the course. Otherwise, I would have to have done a foundation course, which is basically just to get the qualifications you need to get into the course that you want to do. So college was very hard. Didn't enjoy it. I think it's that sudden of independence, that sudden of being in control of your own timetable, being in control of your own kind of journey and everything. It's such a kind of, oh wow, you know, from a school where you get a taxi every day, you got pens and pencils in the classroom and books and everything's kind of supplied for you, all the way to make your own way in. These are the times you need to be here. It's very tricky. These are the days that you need to be. It's very kind of like, oh, and the support at college isn't too great either, just because, you know, things like TAs and everything else, well, at this college anyway, wasn't very kind of essential, you know, there. You know, I think we had one TA in the class, and you know, being a TA of 6 is hard, you know, let alone the class full of 30, you know, 35, you know, 16, you know, 18-year-olds that you know are going to college and trying to learn. So, and it's different support in different areas. It's no longer your core subjects. It's no longer, you know, it's no longer your core subjects in English or maths. It's now, I was doing an IT media course, so where a TA in a school could help me with English, this TA unfortunately wasn't going to be very knowledgeable in IT and media. You know, they were there for more, you know, more support in the English and the reading kind of aspect. But when it came to, you know, how am I going to do this kind of thing in my media course, I don't, you know, it was very hard for them to do it. Around this time, I started thinking about doing acting. So I'd done a play in Newbury called The Passion, where I had about 3 lines, I think. Then I'd done the trilogy on Emborn Road, where I played the village idiot, which isn't far from the truth. And then I done this was the gig in Lambourne, which was Glue on E4. So I was an extra for Glue. on E4. And while I was there was a rope separating the actors and the extras. And me being me, I went over the rope because I wanted to know how to get into the industry. And everyone was kept coming up to me, like crew members and everything. They're going, "Who are you?" And because there was a massive murder storyline going on at the time, I turned round and I said, "Oh, I'm an actor next week who's joining called Jeff. My character's Jeff. It's all very low key at the moment, obviously because the nature of the storyline." And no one even second guessed it. They just went, "Oh, all right then." So I started speaking to the actors, getting agent details. How do you know if people are legit? How do you know if people aren't? Just getting all the details I needed, really. And I can honestly say, currently, I've probably emailed every casting director in the United Kingdom and Ireland, but have now got an agent off that as well. So I'll explain more about that. I then applied for a job at a housing association. It was out of 300 people, and I thought I'd never get the job. Just leaving college at this time as well, just completed my course. And it was always going to be, do I go down the IT route or the media route? And I decided to go down the IT route. 300 people, they narrowed it down to 50. Previously, I did have a interview at a phone company, but that went really bad to the point where I asked the woman, "What are the people like here? Are they nice?" And she turned around to me and she said, "Well, they wouldn't be here if I didn't like them," which I just really kind of threw me, really threw me, intimidated me, made me think, "Oh my God." So safe to say I didn't get that job. But when I went for this job, they wanted me to do an English and maths test because it was for an apprenticeship. So I done that, and I thought, my God, I'm never going to get that. They said come dress smart, and my idea as an autistic person at that time was checkered shirt and chinos, and everyone else turned up in a suit. So I thought, oh my God, I've not got this role. And the only saving grace was I took the 2 books I'd done at the work experience IT company, and they were really impressed. They'd already kind of had their IT candidate in mind because they'd met him at an open day before, but they were really impressed with me. That apparently the HR woman who I speak to now said, "We don't care what position he has, we want him." And they were going to try and find anywhere really in the company to have me. And in the end, they found the budget to have me in IT because they knew that it was kind of really IT that I was interested in. So they took 2 apprentices on in IT instead of the 1 that year, which meant they didn't do it the following year. So sorry for the people that might have wanted an apprenticeship there the second year, but they took that from me. The biggest struggle I had from my apprenticeship was maths. I had level 2 English and I had level 2 IT, but I needed level 2 maths, functional skills, to the point where it took me 7 times to pass. But I eventually did it. And then off the back of that, I then won West Berkshire Apprentice of the Year. Now, the story about that award was my mate went with the Housing Association Apprentice of the Year, and he won it. And I did go for that, and I didn't. I then went for West Berkshire Apprentice of the Year once and didn't get it. So I didn't give up. I said, "No, you've won the Housing Association one. I want to win the West Berkshire one because that means the whole of West Berkshire, not just Housing Association." So went for it and won it, and yeah, that was one of the proudest kind of accomplishments I think in my life, really. It's and that can be seen on one of my YouTubes, which I will share at the end. Around this time, I then got my first big acting break. So I then got an email back from Holby City casting director where they had saw my email, and this woman had 4 of my emails forwarded to her with my resumes. And she said, "I saw you once, and I saw you again, and I saw you again." And I thought, well, let's just give him a shot. A lot of arguments that week. Who's going to take me? Who's not? Eventually, my auntie did. And I remember shaking in the room, and I said to myself, "Don't shake now, shake after." Gave it my all, and went out, and 15 minutes after the audition, they had already emailed to say that they wanted me to play the main part for that episode on Holby City, and that role was playing an autistic person called Stephen, who was getting beat up by his foster brother, um, and they were kind of thinking, you know, is it the dad kind of thing in the storyline? So it was a very kind of off the back of that, I then got an agent, and she got me acting roles on Doctors twice. So I've played two autistic, well, one autistic character and then one undiagnosed character with a form of condition, but they never really specified what it was in the script. But if it was my guess, I would say autistic as well. I mean, I'm not a doctor, hence doctors, but that's kind of where I think they were going with, maybe OCD and autistic person. And yeah, so those are really key roles, really main parts for me as well. That's when I then became an ambassador for the National Autistic Society. So an old teacher got in touch with me called John, who I do speeches with now. He was at the autistic school that I went to. He was the deputy head, and he got back in touch with me. He saw the stuff I was doing, and he recommended that I go for this acting role for the National Autistic Society, which was around employment. Went for the role, got the role, played the character that was also called Stephen in the National Autistic Society campaign, Could You Stand the Rejection? And then became a kind of ambassador for them and do speeches, and have done lots of speeches up at Parliament to try and change things like the Green Paper. So it means that people with a lower qualification can go on to an apprenticeship and complete it, and just create more avenues and more paths for autistic people to go down when they're going into employment. So a lot of kind of speeches up at Parliament to encourage that. And I've also, for the National Autistic Society, spoke on BBC Breakfast, been on The Right Stuff, and from my acting work, I've also done acting for Ford and Santander as well, which was just training videos to help people with autism. I then joined another IT company. So I left the Housing Association after 4 years, and I went to another company. I was there for a year. Unfortunately, I did leave and went to another job just because of health, really. I was working night shifts, and even though I was earning good money, health-wise, it wasn't good. You know, I was very depressed, was putting on a lot of weight. Was then diagnosed with a kidney disease, so kind of decided to leave. And then I kind of exhibited my own kind of employment kind of issue. I've now been at another company for a year, but also now decided to move positions and go into more of an educational side, doing IT at a school. So hopefully that turns out really well, and I'm kind of looking forward to being able to not only interact with the teachers and understand more about their day-to-day job, and understand, you know, how they function, you know, on a day-to-day basis, because we can always have an idea of things, but it might not be reality. So it'd be a good opportunity for me to learn more from them, and what would help them, you know, what would help them, but also I will get to interact with the kids as well and see, you know, what it's like for a kid now, you know, to go to school and all of the above. So while obviously trying to make sure that the IT and the facilities at the school are the best that they can be. The last subject really is how lockdown has affected us and any coping strategies. Coping strategies, I would say video log, journals, doing activities within doors, just building that community indoors with your family, building that close connection, speaking about it. You know, let's not hide from the fact that this is a lockdown, this is going on. You know, let's speak about it. Let's be open about it. and just doing things that are going to take our mind off things and being able to explore doing new things. You know, it might sound really silly, but just go with me on this. And this might sound really weird, but even things like, I remember like a good bonding technique I had with my dad was when he would come up and play video games with me, and even things like that, even things like that can just really help build that connection, build that relationship. Um, and just build memories. A lot of my memories from my dad is like, oh, I remember when we done that on that, and I remember when we did that at this, and it's just a lot of kind of memories where you can have. So just because we're restricted doesn't mean we can't build on them. Also, create things, be imaginative, create new games, create new things to do. Um, you know, and also I would say the one thing that I learned through lockdown is doing more things for myself, and having that kind of time to learn to do things for myself. So learn how to make a cake, or learn how to put the bushing on, or do all these kind of things that I should know and necessarily don't, and it's given me that time to explore, and be able to do it. So that is how I'd say to cope with it. How lockdown has affected us. I think for the first time ever, people might actually be having a little bit of insight of what it's like to be autistic. And people always think, well, what do you mean by that? But people with autism, are more likely to feel lonely. More people with autism are more likely to feel depressed. More likely to have bad thoughts about, suicide and things of that nature. Um, Employment, people with autistic people have been really impacted by employment for the last 10 years, because there's only 16% of people with autism in full-time work, and now we're seeing an increase of people without conditions, being furloughed, being let go from work. So the employment rate is there. So I really feel, and people want to socialise, but they can't. And that's a typical thing with an autistic person as well, is we want to socialise, but we can't. Maybe it's in a different way. Now it's more like you can't because you can't see X, Y, and Z because of what's going on. But for an autistic person, we've always wanted to socialise, but we don't know how to. Now people are forced that they can't socialise because of the situation they're in. So I think for the first time ever, people might just be getting a little bit of insight of actually what it's like to be autistic. Change of routines, change of things that are happening, change of things that we're watching on the telly. All of this is impacting our kind of lives. So for the first time, obviously, it's never going to be a direct comparison with somebody with autism, but it might just be a little bit insight that people could take away from the pandemic. Actually, what we felt in a pandemic of being lonely, going into shops and having our routine disrupted, and having these different rules to follow and these different instructions. This is what somebody with autism could be feeling when they go into a new job, when they go into a shop, when they're doing all these things. So I think that's what it's given us, is maybe more of an insight on autistic people. I do feel that we've been forgotten about during the pandemic, though. Um, More disabled people have died through the pandemic than last year. It's up by like 50%. Um, you know, Autistic people obviously are scared of getting it from care workers as well, and parents. So it has affected us massively, and I think the government actually haven't been very clear on what stands for autistic people, and what doesn't. Things like the face mask. Is that, can you, can't you? Um, so I think it has impacted us a lot, and I think it will impact the employment rate as well. And it's that's what worries me the most, if that percentage goes down, because I think it will. And 16% is not enough of people with autism in full time work, and the fact that's probably going to go down is really kind of disheartening and discouraging. Although understandable with the situation, but I mean, it should never be at 16% anyway. So I think those are the biggest areas it's going to affect us. Is, I think, obviously, we've been forgotten about, and I think the government needs to do more to support us, really. So, what is my message? I think my message is, don't let anyone, tell that you can't do anything that you want to do. Never, never underestimate somebody, on the basis of what they've got, because I think that's happened to me quite a lot in life, and I think over the years, hopefully, I've proved them wrong. Um, so never underestimate. Never let anyone tell you that you can't do anything. I think everyone's employable, to the point where I know someone that has got kind of locked-in syndrome, but he's a successful author because been able to write with his eyes. So, if someone like that can write a book, I think anybody is employable as long as you find the right position, the right support, the right guidance, the right company to help them blossom in their role. And I just think my message really is just make sure that we're kinder to each other, and we understand, and we are compassionate, and we are empathetic, and we do show that that we want to understand, we want to learn more. That would be my key message: is let's not look at people and just judge them by what we see, and understand more about what might be going on in their head, what might be going on in their life, and what might be going on at work. Just be kinder to each other, understand each other more, be more compassionate, and you can do anything as long as you got the right network behind you, the right support, and don't let anyone tell you that you can't. And that would be my message.